everyone, I'm Nicole Newman, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a recipe that I had requested. It is my first requested recipe, so I'm pretty excited about that. My friend Justin Evans requested me to give him a recipe for beef stroganoff. So let's go over our ingredients. We have 2 onions that I have sliced. I have 2 portobello mushrooms sliced. I have 2 cloves of garlic that I have minced. I have a little bit of pepper that I went ahead and ground out, probably about a teaspoon or maybe a little extra. I have some Worcestershire sauce, about a teaspoon of that. I have a tablespoon of Dijon mustard, a tablespoon of hot sauce, 2 tablespoons, give or take, of flour. I have some sour cream, some beef stock, salt. I have some butter. That's what I'm going to be doing my onions in, sauteing in. And then I have a 2-pound chuck roast that I went ahead and sliced into a little bigger than bite-sized strips for our stroganoff. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to melt down some of this butter in the pan. We are going to caramelize our onions. That is going to add a lot of flavor to this recipe. And it's also going to give us a lot of brown bits on the bottom that we can later scrape up. I've got some red wine in the fridge that I'll probably use to go ahead and deglaze the pan with. It's going to be pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and start with about 2.5 to 3 tablespoons of butter. And get this in the pan. I have it at medium. I'm going to get the onions in here, and it sounds like a lot of onions, but once they caramelize down, they're going to be really sweet and delicious. It's not going to feel overpowering at all. Same with our mushrooms. They're going to kind of melt into the sauce and help become part of the creaminess of it. It's going to be really great. So we're going to get this melted down. I've also got some thyme here. Since I always forget one of the ingredients, I've got some thyme there. I'm going to use that in the sauce. It's just going to go really well with the beef. I love the flavor of beef and thyme together, the red wine. So get that melting down. Going to add in our onions, and I'm going to salt these once I get them in the pan. It's going to help draw out some of the water in the onions, and it's going to help them caramelize a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and get these going in there. Just kind of break them up with your fingers. And they're going to take a few minutes to caramelize. You don't want to have the heat up too high where they're sauteing. I'm going to turn mine down a little bit, but you just kind of want them to slowly get a nice golden brown color on them, start melting, and get kind of, I'm trying to think of a good word for it. I'll show you what they look like whenever they're done caramelizing, but they kind of get all mushed together. They kind of melt down a little bit, and they're really delicious. I love caramelized onions. We top them on a steak or anything. Something I don't love is mushrooms, but it is a classic beef stroganoff. If I weren't demoing this for the video, I probably would make it just for my husband and I without the mushrooms. Neither one of us really like them, but they're not diced where they're too hard to pick around if someone doesn't like mushrooms that you're making this for. And they really soak up a lot of the sauce where they help take on a better flavor than what I typically find in mushrooms. So if it's something that you don't like, you certainly don't have to add them in. I'm going to be brave and try them in this recipe. So it's classic. You can't have beef stroganoff without mushrooms. So I'm going to go ahead, keep putting my onions in here and get them caramelizing. When we come back, I will show you what that looks like. We'll get our mushrooms down in there and kind of get everything working together. This recipe, it seems like there's a lot going on here on the table. It really is not. And once you get all the steps done, it literally comes together so quickly. Once you saute your onions, your mushrooms, the beef, and then boom, it's time to toss it all together. I'm serving mine over some egg noodles, but you certainly could do it over rice or mashed potatoes, or just on its own. You could just eat the stroganoff in the gravy and the onions and the mushrooms together just as one dish. But it certainly tastes good over a lovely, comforting carbohydrate. So we're doing ours over noodles. That's how my mom always did it. But I know people do it over rice, over mashed potatoes, whatever you'd like. So it just depends on what you have on hand. All right, guys, gonna add some salt in here, and I'll see you back in just a few minutes. All right, guys, so I have been letting my onions kind of saute down here and get nice and caramelized. They are not quite there yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and add in my mushrooms. I don't want to overdo it on the onions, so they are almost there. I'm going to add in my mushrooms, let them go for a few moments. I'm going to add in the garlic and saute that down just until it's fragrant, and then we can, I'm going to remove all of this and start doing our beef. I'm going to do that probably in a couple batches. I'm going to go ahead and get our mushrooms sauteing down here. Just that way they'll get nice and kind of reduce down in their size and help become the same. They believe it or not, are going to kind of reduce down to about the size of the onions. So it'll be really nice in the background for the sauce. I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more salt, just another pinch. You don't want to overdo it on the salt, but it does help draw out the moisture, help things reduce down nicely. I'm just going to keep an eye on here. I might add a little bit more butter in there as well, so that way I have plenty of oil in my pan. And then once I'm done with the beef, I'm going to add some butter in there and then just add a little bit of the flour and essentially be making a roux to kind of thicken up our sauce. I'm not going to do a traditional roux with the 2 tablespoons of butter, 2 tablespoons of flour, 2 cups of liquid. I don't need it to be as thick as what maybe a velouté or an espagnole sauce might be. I'm going to go ahead and let it go a little thinner than that, but still want it to be thicker than what it's going to be right now. So I'm going to go ahead. The mushrooms are looking pretty good. They're sauteing down nicely. I'm going to add in our garlic. I'm also going to season these up with a little bit of pepper and a couple of sprigs of thyme that I'm just going to take the leaves right off of here and into our onions and everything here. That's just going to add a little bit of flavor to these guys. Alright, go ahead and give this a stir. It's looking pretty good in here. It's smelling amazing in here. I'm going to just let this go a few more seconds. I'm going to grab a bowl to put this all in whenever it's done. And then I'm going to start with our beef, and then we'll be ready to go. Like I said, it's one of those things you kind of have to do things in pieces, but then it's simply just throwing it all together and you are set. So might seem like it's a lot for dinner. It really isn't. It goes pretty quick. I removed the onions and the mushrooms and the garlic from the pan, and I just have that sitting here on a plate. I'm going to go ahead. I've got some more butter melting down in my pan, and I'm going to add some salt to about half of my chuck roast. I don't want to do it all because I don't want it to draw out a lot of moisture in it, and also some pepper I'm going to add to that. I'm going to work in batches. If I draw out too much moisture from this, it's not going to sear. I want this to sear. I wanted those to caramelize. I want a good sear on these, and if I draw out too much moisture, it's going to get too wet, and then it won't be able to sear properly in the pan. So I'm just going to get these going in here. You don't want to overcrowd the pan, because if you do, it's going to, if you overcrowd, that's the dryer. If you overcrowd the pan, then it's going to steam the meat instead of searing it, and that just would not taste good at all. So I'm just going to let these go half at a time, work in a batch. So that way it's not too overcrowded. Alright, that's good. I'm going to let these brown. I kind of keep moving them around, get them brown and seared on all sides. And then at the end, we're going to put them back in the sauce and let them cook just for a few minutes, and that'll help cook them through. So I'm going to go ahead and get these going. I'm going to drain these whenever they're done and do my second batch. When we get back, it'll be time to deglaze our pan, get everything working there, and start putting this all together. I'm going to go ahead and start preheating my water for my egg noodles. If you were making this recipe at home, now would be a time that I would probably start preheating water for rice, for noodles, for potatoes, or whatever you're going to put it over. Start getting your carb ready, and I'll see you guys back in a few. Alright guys, so I've let my beef brown up. I'm going to go ahead and remove this last batch from the pan. And then I'm going to deglaze my pan. I've got a lot of brown burnt bits to the bottom of the pan. Typically burnt means inedible, but in this case burnt is our friend. The fact that we have all of those lovely sooks at the bottom of the pan, they are going to help develop our sauce and add so much flavor. This is not an ingredient you can buy at the grocery store. This is just liquid gold that happens through all of our searing of our mushrooms and our onions and our beef. So definitely do not want to waste all of that flavor there. I'm going to go ahead and just deglaze the pan with a little bit of red wine. Turn it up a bit. Just going to deglaze it. I don't want to add a lot of it because I do need to make a roux, but I want to go ahead and get the bottom of this pan deglazed nicely. So I'm just going to let this, just going to scrape across the bottom of the pan and work all of this up, so that way I can get as much flavor in my sauce as what the pan has to offer. And I'm just going to probably grab a bowl to put this in since I am going to be making a roux. If I weren't making a roux, I would just let this reduce, add everything back in. But I do want to have a little bit thicker of a gravy. So torn between needing to thicken a sauce and not wanting to waste all this beautiful flavor. Certainly not going to get rid of that. So I will just have an extra bowl to wash. No big deal. Totally, totally worth it. You can see, I don't know, I should have shown you before, but gotten a lot of the brown bits off the bottom of the pan. All flavor now that's going to be in that. I know it looks like it's not a lot, but it's going to be really concentrated with flavor. It's going to be fantastic. I'm just going to grab a little bowl to pour it into. All right, perfect. So we've got a pretty clean pan. I'm going to go ahead and add in some butter. Let that melt down, add in a little bit of flour. Start getting everything back in here once we get that melted. Gonna add in, you certainly don't have to use all of these. These are just 3 things that I like to add to sauces. They add a little bit of depth, a little bit of flavor in the background, kind of gives you that inquisitive, what is that I'm tasting? I love being able to see people's faces trying to figure out what it is in the background. So I have my Worcestershire, the Dijon mustard, and the hot sauce. Going to go ahead and get that added in too when we add in our beef stock. Got my butter melted down. I'm going to add in just a little bit of flour. You don't need a whole lot. Just to kind of absorb the butter and help thicken my sauce a little bit. And I'm using homemade beef stock. You can use store-bought, or I have recipes for homemade stock and broth. So let the flour cook for just a few minutes, get the starchy flavor out. All of this back into our pan, along with our delicious pan drippings that we deglaze down. I'm going to go ahead and start adding my stock in. I'm going to add it in slowly, kind of let it thicken a bit, so that way it doesn't seize and get lumpy. Since the stock is cold, my pan is hot. And as we're doing this, I'm still going to continue to work up any bottom or brown bits from the bottom of the pan that may have developed from the roux, or will continue to develop as I am building this sauce. So that's looking pretty good. Add in some more beef stock. And then I'm just going to let this simmer for a few minutes. It'll help tenderize the beef a little bit more. Chuck is a pretty overworked muscle. It's the shoulder. And it's a really hard worked muscle. So it's not very tender, but since we have it in small pieces, it's not like maybe something in your crock pot where it might take 4 hours on high, 8 hours on low for it to soften. This is still going to be really tender. And our sauce is looking really great. Gonna add in a little more beef stock. Bring it up a little bit. Add in our Worcestershire. And then our hot sauce. And our Dijon mustard. All of that mixed in. And then at the very end, I'm just going to add a 1/3 cup of sour cream. That is another classic. Just like you can't have stroganoff without the mushrooms, you certainly cannot have stroganoff without the sour cream. I'm going to go ahead and add in the sour cream. And then whenever I top these, I'm going to top them with a dollop of sour cream and some of our fresh thyme. It's just going to help bring a little bit of freshness, creaminess to the end of the meal. So this really hearty, earthy flavor that I have going on here. Top it off with something nice and fresh. It'll be a nice bright contrast, help bring everything together, lighten it up. So I'm going to let this go for just a few minutes till my sauce thickens up and reduces a little bit. I don't need it to be as thick as what maybe a gravy would be for Thanksgiving or anything, but just a little bit so that way it can coat the noodles nicely. Right now it's a little soupy, so I'm going to let it go for a few minutes. My noodles are down. I'm going to go ahead and give those a stir, and when we come back, I'll have this all plated up for you guys. Show you what it looks like with our thyme and our sour cream, and it's going to be perfect. So I'll see you back in a few minutes. Alright, so my noodles are done. I added the sour cream into my sauce. It is gorgeous. It is thickened up so nicely. You beautiful, beautiful sauce. It's going to be fantastic. We have our onions, our mushrooms, the garlic, the beef in here. I'm going to go ahead. I've got my noodles in the bowl. Just going to ladle some of this right over the top. It's going to soak up all of this delicious sauce. We have our the Worcestershire sauce, the hot sauce. We have the pan dripping. So much flavoring going into that. And this is just going to be so perfect. This is perfect on like a chilly night. I like to make it in the fall. Really hearty, stick to your bone kind of food. So really delicious for those cold nights. Lots of gravy in there. All right. So I've got them there. I'm going to take some time, just kind of sprinkle over each one just for a little bit of something fresh and green. And get that on there. And then I have some sour cream, and I'm just going to top with a little bit of sour cream on each one. A little something extra to mix in. And I am ready to dive in. Get a nice noodle here. And all of that sauce. This sauce is like liquid gold. All right. Fantastic. So much flavor happening in there. The beef is really good. It's a lot of nice texture in here. The noodles just soak up all of that sauce. It's really great. A good recipe for sharing. It's a nice recipe to take somebody after maybe they've had a baby or maybe a death in the family. It's pretty much just one pot. You got your pot for your starch, but you know, the stroganoff itself isn't very much, so it's great. It's just dinner for my husband and I tonight, but definitely a real treat. We make stroganoff something simple, and we love it. So I'll see you next time, guys. Make sure you tag me in social media at Nicole Newman's Kitchen, and let me know what you think of it in the comments below.